Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus, and in addition to being a psychologist, I'm featured in the documentary about anti Semitism, Never Again Is Now. I am a Dutch Jew and the daughter of Holocaust survivors. In 2006, I moved to the United States because of the rising anti Semitism in Europe.
I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller, the founder of the nonfiction Holocaust theater project, ThinEdgeOfTheWedge.com. My ancestors moved to the United States from Latvia and Russia at the turn of the 20th century. And in 1970, only 25 years after the end of World War II, my U.S. Army officer husband and I were stationed in Munich, Germany.
Our guest today is Zachary Singerman. Welcome, Zachary, on our show. It's great to have you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Zachary is an 11th grader at Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School in Bethesda, Maryland, and the founder of the nonprofit Gen Z Jews. Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your organization?
So, hi, I'm Zach Singerman. So I am a high schooler right now, and I'm part of Gen Z. And I created the organization Gen Z Jews Fighting Anti-Semitism. And what we really try to do is educate other Gen Z kids on anti-Semitism and how to fight anti-Semitism, because children are the youth, like children are the youth are the future, and basically if we can educate Gen Z right now, then we'll have a strong chance of fighting anti-Semitism in the future.
Right. So Gen Z means Generation Z. It's the generation that is younger than 25 years old right now, I think.
Yeah,
it's the generation after the millennials, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and you are active in letting them, how to say, stand up or speak out against anti-Semitism right now, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So that's remarkable, Zach, that you started this organization, and we'll ask you questions about that later on. But can you first tell us a little bit more about yourself, your own background, your family, your school?
So I have lived in Washington, D.C. my entire life. I've also gone to a Jewish day school since kindergarten, so this is going to be my 12th year going to a Jewish day school. My family's been in America since before 1900, and that's pretty much it.
Where did they come from into America?
They came from Lithuania, Russia, Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Okay. So can you tell us, please, a little bit about, I read you organized a summit against anti-Semitism with Barry Wise as the keynote speaker. The audience was Generation Z youth, right? What did you discuss with them there?
So originally that summit was going to be on March 15th, 2020. So it was one of the first few things canceled with COVID. But originally that was going to be a summit where we had Barry Weiss speaking to just like Gen Z kids from the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And it was just going to be like talking about what anti-Semitism really is and really how to fight it. And with that canceled, we ended up spreading to or postponed. We ended up spreading to a very national based type organization, and we started doing a lot more online things, and we did end up actually having that summit, but it was on Zoom, and it actually led to us having a lot more summits with more speakers later on.
Great, great. So in your opinion piece, in the foreword, you wrote how you became exhausted by violence against Jews and couldn't keep waiting for adults to fix it. How did this lead to starting your organization?
So 6 months after my bar mitzvah, a terrorist walked into my grandmother's synagogue, Tree of Life, and murdered 11 people. And then 6 months after that, there was the Poway shooting. And I felt that I had really spent a year talking about anti-Semitism, but I didn't really do anything. And, my parents, who were both Generation X, they were almost in a golden age where they didn't experience that much anti-Semitism. So they never really learned how to fight it. And so I kind of felt that teens can't wait for adults to learn how to fight it. We have to learn ourselves, because almost all of Gen Z is going to be voting in the next presidential election. And we need to be educated so that we can fight anti-Semitism. And yeah, that's it.
That's so interesting and remarkable, Zach, in my mind, that what you're saying is your generation's parents are not experienced with anti-Semitism, so it's hard for them to teach you what to do now that it's here in your generation. So you decided, I have to learn and I have to teach my fellow generation teens how to stand up or to speak out against anti-Semitism, how to stand up against it, because your reality is different from your parents' reality in their generation and when they were young, right? And we commend you for it, and we are ourselves strong believers in everybody getting, every Jew, everybody who is with the Jews, become involved and do your part in stopping the increasing anti-Semitism that is going on globally, also unfortunately in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Are there, what is it you teach your the teens in the Jewish teens in the United States? What do you teach them to do against that?
So over the past 100 years or so, or not 100 years, hundreds of years, anti-Semitism has really changed meaning and changed its definition a huge amount of times. And so the first thing we really try to do is teach what anti-Semitism is, because once you know what anti-Semitism is, you can point it out in your daily life more, and you can see where things that you might not have known are anti-Semitic are actually anti-Semitic, and you can help put a stop to those small things, which is really one of the first important steps.
Can you give examples for our listeners of just some of the simple things that, and we agree with you very much, but some of the simple things people don't realize are anti-Semitic?
I don't know if this is so simple, but calling Israel an apartheid state, because you're denying the fact of there being a Jewish homeland and a country that was made to keep Jews safe.
Okay.
Yes. So that's what we see a lot these days, right? That anti-Semitism
Exactly.
is targeting Israel, and then it becomes complicated because, of course, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, and there is freedom of speech about Israel's policies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the other hand, it's sometimes or often targeted in an anti-Semitic way. And what you just said, Israel is an apartheid state, it's not true, first of all. And secondly, it's demonizing Israel. It's a form of demonization, right? That Jews have always experienced demonization.
Yeah, and what you were talking about, really you can disagree with governments because everyone disagrees with governments all the time. So you can disagree with what the Israeli government does and their actions, but you can't deny the right of the country to exist.
Right. Okay. Is there something in the in what the older generations and of Jews in America, the older generations of Jews and their organizations, is there something you miss in what they do? Is there something they should do, what you would recommend them to do, and they're not doing yet?
Do you mean like in like Jewish organizations or just
Yeah.
organizations?
Jewish organizations.
I think like Jewish organizations really need to like understand kind of that they're going to be targeted nowadays for things that they didn't do. And they need to just kind of like put out messages saying like you can't target Jewish businesses or like Jewish companies for like not even doing things that you're accusing Israelis of, because like we're seeing American Jews getting beat up in the streets.
And
So
they don't.
are you saying that you feel, as a Gen Z Jew, do you feel that these long established American Jewish organizations perhaps are not taking, and I am kind of steering you in a certain direction, anti-Semitism seriously enough? Because in some cases they come from a generation in which there wasn't that much anti-Semitism in America.
Mm-hmm. And I also feel like, sometimes they're just like, okay, this bad thing happened to Jews. That's kind of typical, I guess. And then they don't think much of it, which is like the complete wrong way to take it.
Yes, exactly. We started this podcast to encourage people to speak up and to not let things slide. So in a way, you are sort of, my kids went to Jewish day school the same way as you did all the way through. And so in a way, they were protected from anti-Semitism. But I'm sure that some of the other young people that you work with go to public school. And so what happens, they must tell you about what happens to them in their schools. And can you maybe share something and then how you advise these teens to deal with that anti-Semitism?
So I've definitely heard things about that, but like even nowadays going to a Jewish school doesn't completely protect you from seeing anti-Semitism, because like there's so much of it nowadays that like you hear about it all the time, and like you hear so many stories about it. And just like at schools there can be like just people like not being friends with you, I've heard, like because you support Israel, because that's really like that's become a very heated topic nowadays in America.
Yeah.
And like fighting it, just kind of like understanding what's happening in Israel yourself and being able to talk about that to the people who are like being mean to you because of it. And also like who is talking to you about it like is really important. Like if it's like a teacher compared to a friend, like with a friend you can really explain it to them. With the teacher, you'd have to go to your principal.
And
Okay.
do you know students who have had the courage to go to their principals?
Not personally, but I'm sure that there's been some.
So your advice is to educate yourself about what's going on in Israel. For instance, I would suggest read the book of Noah Tishby. She explains it. She lays out very clearly what the history is of Israel and what the law is in Israel and what the rights are of the various groups living in Israel. That would be a good way to start, and to explain it to your friends who are kind of try to cancel you. And maybe if they hear probably they're not very informed and still yet they cancel you, but if you inform them better, they may take you back as a friend, probably. And is that, do you encounter a lot of anti-Semitism online, even though you are in a Jewish Day School? Do you see a lot of it online, maybe?
Just like sometimes if I'm going through like Instagram or Twitter or TikTok also, like you can just see people being blatantly anti-Semitic or just like saying things like, oh, like Israel doesn't deserve to exist. Oh, Jews are all awful people. Like the typical stereotypes like big noses and money hungry.
Yes.
And so how
Um,
do you deal with that on social media?
On social media, you can really like reach out to like the people who control like what kind of content gets taken down, because obviously like social media is not a place where you try to like hurt people. It's supposed to be a place where like you can connect with people who you may not have connected with before, and really like talk to those people who runs like the terms and conditions, or like report a video, report a certain Instagram post, because when you report it, it shows that like we care that people are posting anti-Semitic things. We care that people are being like bad people, and we want these taken down.
I would like to just emphasize for our listeners clearly what, I mean, you said it clearly. So instead of necessarily engaging with people, because that can just lead to, on social media, lead to unpleasant consequences, there's an easier way to deal with it. And so what Zach is saying is that you literally can click, there's usually a button for lots of things that say report this post, this video. And then there are departments in these online platforms that deal with it. So that's really important, because what Zach is saying is if we don't report it, then those departments think they're okay. But if a lot of people report offensive content, it's frequently taken down. Did I say that correctly? Just to encourage our listeners to click that button, that little button.
Mm-hmm. And also like sometimes someone might not realize what they're doing is anti-Semitic. And so that's like, sometimes you just have to message them and say like, hey, what you did here was kind of anti-Semitic, here's why. And that's like a reason why you really have to like be educated on what anti-Semitism is, because then you can find those little things.
Would you like to give your definition of anti-Semitism?
So I don't remember the definition exactly, but there is one that is being right now put around the world,
Right.
and called the IRA definition.
Yes, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition.
Exactly. And so that's the definition that I really try to follow, because it's being accepted by so many countries around the world right now.
Yeah, we do use it on some of our materials, so basically. But I think basically we could say in a really simplified form for our listeners, it's the kind of offensive comments that people wouldn't make about other groups, whatever that group is, but that people make about Jews, and have no qualms about saying something like Jews care about money, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So that's what we define.
Yeah, the classical prejudices, the prejudices about Jews, they're all into money. It's all about money. They control the world. They will not be honest to you. They're not loyal to the country they live in, etc. But also it says it can also take a form, as you discussed before, Zach, where it targets Israel. And then the line can be drawn between legitimate criticism of Israel and where it becomes anti-Semitic, according to this definition, is the 3 Ds. So demonizing Israel, like hyperbolic comparisons, like Israel's like the Nazis, or Israel is an apartheid, like South Africa was an apartheid state. Demonization, that's the first D. The second D is singling out Israel for sanctions or for criticisms, so or standards, to hold Israel to standards that the neighboring country are not held to. And the third D is delegitimization, which is denying the right of the Jewish state to exist. In other words, anti-Zionism, right? That's part of the definition too. And Phyllis, where can listeners find that definition?
Of IHRAs. We have it on our website, but for this particular podcast, I'm going to put it underneath the comments for this podcast.
Great.
So that's where they can find it. And I wanted to say something since we're talking about the establishment of the State of Israel. When did you learn about the Holocaust, and did what you've learned about the Holocaust influence your taking action now rather than later?
I really think it did, because I feel like the earliest I remember learning about the Holocaust is like fourth grade, which is 7 years ago now for me. So like we didn't learn about it in detail at the time, but last year in 10th grade, I had this course called Modern Jewish History. And we spent a good half the year learning about the Holocaust and the buildup to the Holocaust, and seeing how slowly and slowly Jewish rights were being taken away. And then those Jews couldn't leave the country anymore. They couldn't leave Germany. And, you know, people just couldn't get out. And I think what we have to take away from that is, like, you can never act too early against anti-Semitism, because when you wait too long, it just, things grow and grow and grow. But if we can stop anti-Semitism now or in the near future, then it will stop growing. And that's what's important.
Very well said. The name of my nonfiction play, which lots of people don't get, is called Thin Edge of the Wedge. And that's exactly what it is. You don't say anything, you don't say anything, you don't say anything until the wedge is so large that it's too late to turn back. So that's why Evelyn and I are just in awe that you're starting this awareness organization at your age, because you're right. The sooner people start speaking up against anti-Semitism, the better chance we have of not letting it grow.
Exactly.
Evelyn? Question?
Yes, it's also the lesson. My parents, who were survivors, what they taught me was we should have taken Hitler more seriously earlier on. And if when he was still small, we could have stopped him. But we let him grow and we thought ourselves, oh, it won't be so bad. And oh, he won't go outside of Germany. And oh, he won't come to Holland. And oh, he won't do to the Jews what he says he does. He will do. But he did all of that. And then by the time we woke up, they said it was too late. He was too big, too strong. So that's also why the title of my documentary is Never Again is Now. We say never again all the time. We see what Phyllis was just describing. We see it happening now. There is more and more anti-Jewish hate that we observe, and we keep postponing doing the right thing against it and getting all involved in it. But we should do it now. Now we still can. I totally agree with that.
Have you had pushback from adults or anyone who have said to you, you're too young to do this, or why are you worried about this? I'm just curious.
No, not at all. Anytime I've like talked with an adult about like asking them if they wanted to be interviewed, or if I'm taking a class like with an adult on anti-Semitism, or if I'm like working with another organization, they've all been like so excited to work with me, because they're so happy that like Gen Z is really getting involved at like a young age, and they're really excited to see that like the future seems to be in good hands, and that we're gonna keep fighting for a long time.
How can other Gen Z Jews get in touch with you? I mean, and we'll also put this in the comments, but please describe and describe how, so people don't feel they have to like, you know, spend hours a day. What are the kinds of things that you'd be happy for people to join you doing?
Something super easy. Just follow me on Instagram at Gen Z Jews _fighting _anti-Semitism. Because, you know, we're trying to be active on there, and we're really trying to build our platform on social media, because when you build up your platform on social media, it's very easy to access Gen Z, because all of Gen Z is on social media. And also just like reach out to me, like DM me through Instagram or email me at zach.tsas@gmail.com and just see if there's any ideas that I have. Also, I'm like at this very moment, I'm trying to create like a whole group of Jewish teens who can like have a database of just like other kids they can call and lean on for support and ask for help from.
Oh, Vic, could you just talk about that a couple more minutes? In other words,
Oh yeah.
tell me, how do you envision that working?
So just kind of like creating like a really big group of just Jewish students across America and maybe other countries as well if it gets to that. And just like having people who you can like talk to, like other Gen Z people who are your age, who could become your friends and who understand like your point of view, and just being able to talk to them about like if something has happened to you, or like just really being able to work through any experiences that you have, just so that you're never alone.
That's
I've seen good examples of that elsewhere, and I think that really works well. And from that, other actions come. That's an excellent approach, I think, Zach. And,
Thank you.
Evelyn, do you have one more question to ask him before we let him wrap up?
I have, yeah, I have no questions. I would just recommend all parents and and their peers, and all grandparents and their peers who are listening to this podcast to look at our website, Never Again Is Now podcast on YouTube, and look up the episode of today with Zach Zingerman, and pass on all the contact information to their children and grandchildren who are also Generation Z and who may experience also anti-Semitism, so that they get that so that they can connect with other Jews of Generation Z who experience similar things.
Zach, you want to add anything? And we will put, the URLs that you said in the program, we'll put it below too, so people can have easy access.
Awesome. Just start taking a stand now, because as I said earlier, it's never too early to act against anti-Semitism, and it can spread like a wildfire. So if you put it out when it's small, it'll be okay. But if you just let it keep growing and growing, it's gonna burn down a lot of trees.
That is beautifully said.
Thank
Thank you so much. And thank you for our listeners. And I urge everyone who hasn't seen Evelyn's documentary, Never Again Is Now, to go to her website, join neveragainisnow.com, where you can watch it for free. And you can find out about my nonfiction play and the additional resources, including a reading list and videos, etc., at thinedgeofthewedge.com. And whenever you can, speak without putting yourself in physical danger. Speak up against anti-Semitism and hate. Thank you.